Wow, that was quick. Okay, welcome everybody to the Bellevue Schools Foundation Education Connections. I'm Lynn Janelle, Executive Director, and I'm thrilled to be able to present to you the investments that our donors are making in the computer science initiative for K through 12 students. Presenting today are Bianchi and Cheryl Bortleson, and they are curriculum developers for us. We also have Dr. Sarah Brewer here, who will be speaking with you, and a few great kids who are going to show how wonderful this program is going. If you like what you see here and you want to see more of it in our schools, please remember the flyer that talks about the K through 12 investments. Learn about it and join the foundation. Every donation makes a difference for a child. So without further ado, Greg.
Thank you so much. And before they sneak out, a little round of applause for Shannon and Nate McDonald, who got us started with a little coding today. As you were walking in, you could see them doing that up front. So I want to start really by thanking Bellevue Schools Foundation for the generous gift that makes everything that you see today possible. Really, all of the computer science work is fundamentally financed by Bellevue Schools Foundation, and without that support, we could not do this work. And I want to thank them for the vision in recognizing the significance of computer science and that we really need to be thinking about how can we prepare every student in Bellevue with computer science necessary for the 21st century workforce. Also, as we get started, we're going to begin with a little snap of video of work at elementary. One of the most exciting things about this computer science initiative is that we're starting early. So we're going all the way down to kindergarten, and we're looking up to 12th grade, right? So it's the whole pathway. So what Cheri has prepared for us in kind of working along with Dr. Brewer over here is a snapshot of that work at Phantom Lake Elementary. So we're going to let that roll, and as we do, just kind of look for connections between the computer science and what we 21st century skills, right? So evidence of critical thinking, communication, students collaborating and working together. I think you'll see all of that and how that ties into the computer science work.
Each side is 100 pixels, so it would be 120. And then 100 pixels. And then shouldn't we find about 50? Wait, that means this one should be like 25. Then we go forward, and then another forward. Hey, hold on. So this is how we did it: forward, forward, left, forward, forward, and then another forward. Wow.
Well, we were thinking of ideas, and we were working together, and we weren't fighting about it. We were like talking it out. And then we didn't like make fun of the person if they got it wrong.
Yeah, we would just fix our mistakes.
We were just fixing our mistakes.
And like how it was challenging to actually make puzzles for you to figure out how you're supposed to do it. It's very fun, actually.
Yeah, it's fun. It gives you a challenge, and it's kind of, in some ways, it's teaching you how to be. Like, it's teaching you to be more, like, if you get it wrong, then you can try again, so. I don't even know the list.
Hey, Daddy.
List. Turn.
Yeah, your turn. I'm now somewhere here. I mean, that's me. Who's now have somebody else ask.
It's really fun trying to figure it out, but it's also really frustrating to try to figure it out because it's like you think you got it right, and then you don't understand. You're like, I got this right, and then like you get frustrated. Like I the pixel stuff, and I can't believe I don't know how I got that right, but I did. And it's for all ages. It's like could be from like just born to being like grown ups. I say, like when you're like old, you can if you really want to learn, it's like for all.
Wow, 1 month old, right? That's ambitious. But you did hear a student talk about it's for all kids, right? Anyone can enter, and there's a starting point for all kids, and that is fundamentally what we believe about the Computer Science Initiative. So that's down to kindergarten. That's the work that we're going to go through today. We want you to get a vision for. Our goal is for you to see the vision of the initiative, the Computer Science Initiative, understand the pathway that we're trying to develop, and why are we trying to build that pathway, and where are we right now, right? So we're in year one and just a few months in, but you can see already the impact at schools, right? And this is going on throughout the elementary schools in all of our buildings. So what I'd like to do is kind of just back up really quickly and say, let's briefly talk about STEM, give you the overview of the STEM initiative as a whole, and then focusing in on the computer science specific work that we're doing now. So again, with the why STEM, the science, the technology, and engineering and math piece, and that often brings to mind jobs and the needs for us to prepare students for the 21st century workforce. And I think that's true. I want to remind also that many drivers here include equity and engagement. You could see how engaged the students were in doing this work, and that many skills rolled into all of the STEM work. It's truly interdisciplinary, and I think it goes beyond science, technology, engineering, and math. You could see the social and emotional learning that was going on for students too, as they have to collaborate and communicate with each other, the teamwork that they're developing as they do that. Those are all critical life skills. So it's really not just about preparing someone to work at Microsoft or Amazon or Google, but recognizing that these skills would be required by all students. And when I say I'm not simply referring to the social emotional learning skills, but even the computer science skills. We recognize that really all students need that, regardless of whether they end up working in a tech field down the line or not. They're fundamental skills. So this is that kind of snapshot of what we mean when we're talking about 21st century skills. And I think you could probably see this in the video we just looked at. And we also really let this kind of guide us in the development of all of our STEM work. The computer work, yes, but also the other things we do with STEM. So I want to give you a quick overview of those. Just a reminder that the elementary STEM initiative is really growing beyond elementary, but where it started was a couple of years ago, year one, that would be the 2013-14 school year. We started with 3 pilot schools, Ardmore, Medina, and Newport Heights. Last year, we expanded to bring 7 more schools, and then this year, we're at all elementary schools in the district. So we're scaling that STEM work, and at the same time, we're adding on a computer science component this year. What does that look like? The STEM work does include, in the classroom, the incorporation of engineering. So we really revisited and revamped the science curriculum that we've historically by engineering into that. And that's important we do that because the next generation science standards call for us to do that. And that's like Common Core for science. Other things that are on with STEM include family engineering. So as we revise the curriculum, we want individuals in the community to know how their kids, why it's important. So like the engineering nights, we're also starting to see coding nights and other pieces that support the work we do during the school day. We've even expanded the STEM work to the summer school curriculum and the early learning program so that we can really reach all kids. And then I want to point out also, we're folding the technology into the arts curriculum. So last week I was working with art teachers at the elementary level to talk about how we can incorporate 3D printers into that curriculum. And similarly, we're using little bits, which you see a picture of at the bottom. These are the little circuits that students can use to assemble together to create kinetic sculptures or sculptures that move and respond to things like light or sound or touch. Okay, so as we get to talking about coding, I want to point out that we did spend a couple of years building some important background with teachers, developing skills around robotics, and some of the coding pieces as well. So we started the robotics pieces 2 years ago, and that was that K-5. You can see the little B-bot right there, where kindergartners and first graders are really learning how to code and move those B-bots around the grid. And they enter programs right on the side of the B-bot up there where you can see bots. The Lego We Do is another piece, and that's that block-based coding foundation. So many of our students are seeing this in the after-school environment through these clubs. Again, that's covered by the Bellevue Schools Foundation. The coding initiative, the computer science initiative that we'll talk about today, is also about making sure that this goes throughout the school day, not just in the after-school environment. This is a link of coding, right? How is the robotics like coding, for example? And you can see the B-bots. Again, these are kindergartners and first graders. On the paper there at the bottom, that's where a student has really written out their code. Now at K1, that code is kind of their arrows. They're up, down, sideways, but they're writing that kind of a trial one, and then they run their robot through that, maybe go back and make adjustments, and then there's kind of a second line of code where they maybe made corrections to it. But we're starting that kind of logic-based thinking and that sequential thinking that's so important for the coding. And this shows that, when Code.org launched the Hour of Code, we were involved with that in year one, and we continue to be involved with that. So Hour of Code, yes, is something that we're doing, but we want to stress to you today is we're doing a lot more than Hour of Code, and that's what's really exciting about this work. Hour of Code fundamentally is about exposing kids to computer science and giving that introduction. What we're going to talk about today is how we really build a pathway or a curriculum so that students can consistently get exposed to computer science and gain skills as they go. So this year is really a lot to do with developing teacher capacity and talking about how we can scale it. And I'll turn it over to Cheri, and she'll tell you specifically what we're doing with the Computer Science Initiative.
So to talk a little bit about our K-5 steps. So we have expanded, as Greg mentioned, we expanded the initiative to all 17 schools, and we're really proud of this because we are not just serving some kids and through a magnet school or a lottery to get into to have engineering and coding and robotics, but we're scaling this to all 17 and then soon 18 elementary schools. And that is primarily because of the support we get from the community and Bellevue Schools Foundation. So our initiative is also expanding to the middle school. So we have engineering activities happening in 6th grade, and then we have some teachers who are piloting some of those units and work at 7th and 8th grade. So as our kids are gaining experiences at the elementary school, of course, we want to roll up that work and those experiences for kids into middle school. So we continue to analyze the next-gen science standards, and like Greg mentioned, that's the Common Core for science, and we are looking at that alignment K-12. So Washington State adopted the next-gen science standards in October of 2013. So part of why we started the STEM work when we did was to introduce engineering, because that was one of the big new components of the next-gen science standards was the introduction of engineering K-12. So we engaged in that work right away, and we continue to engage in analyzing curriculum and resources and best practices K-12, and we'll continue that work in the next several years, updating our curriculum and instruction. But we have spent a lot of time at the elementary level training teachers on the next-gen practices. So before we even get the new curriculum, we're really working on the alignment of our practices in the classroom. Another big component of our STEM initiative K-5, well, K-12, is our work that we've started on the K-12 computer science pathway. And that's our transition into really explaining that work and that initiative and how we're engaging kids and teachers this year. So going to a little bit of why computer science. So in the video, as Greg mentioned, look for those 21st century skills. That's a buzzword. 21st century skills, but we really do believe we want to prepare kids for the world that they will enter after they leave us after high school. So yes, it's important whether kids go into to computer science per se, we do want to be mindful of the landscape that's out there, both national and regional trends. So what we know is there's a huge gap between the jobs available and the number of students who are graduating from university in computer science. So the projection is we will be about 1 million jobs. There'll be 1 million more jobs by 2020 in computer science. And computer science and programming is not just about the tech industry. Every industry is tech and incorporates technology. So we really have studied both the national and regional and state trends around computer science in particular, how it's situated within STEM. So this is from the National Science Foundation. We know that fewer computer science than about 10 years ago and about half as many women. So there, we can speculate why. There's lots of reasons, but we really want to take it on and figure out, well, what can we do to help prepare all of our students, particularly those who have been marginalized in science and in more particular computer science. So there's not a lot of data or resources we can turn to figure out what's the landscape across the country as far as computer science education in the K-12 world. So we can look at our AP, Advanced Placement Computer Science Participation, the national data, to kind of get a sense of, okay, what's the landscape and what's happening. So this is national data. So of AP participation, there's a tiny sliver is around computer science. So most students at the high school level engaging within the science realm of AP courses, 98% are really engaged in the math and more general courses, so physics, chemistry, biology, etc. 2% are engaged in or taking computer science courses. Of that tiny sliver, we know that about 15% are girls across the country. And in the national level, only 8% are Hispanic Americans or African Americans. So we as a team, we in district, we really looked at that, especially last spring. But okay, well now what do we know about Bellevue School District, our computer science participation? Again, we don't have a lot of ways to analyze this other than our capstone course, which is AP Computer Science. So if you look at our participation, we have about 56% are Asian, and our data have about 4% are Hispanic or Black when we look at our participation by race. When we looked at our AP Computer Science participation by gender, we have 30% female, 69% male. So our goal as a district is we want to provide computer science and coding for all children starting in kindergarten within our system. Because we know if we wait until high school to engage kids in computer science, it's too late. Because they won't have had the fundamental experiences they need to be successful in AP Computer Science, which is our capstone course. So that's the why. So why are we engaged in this? So one, we want to make sure that we're educating our kids within the school system to be prepared for the world that they will enter. And we know we have some work to do around for students who have been traditionally marginalized in the system, both girls and students of color. But we also want to boost our participation and make all students able to take AP Computer Science when they get to the high school. So what does that take? Well, it's going to take us starting at the elementary level. So this year, we have engaged in a K-5 coding pilot. So what does that mean? Last spring, we invited all elementary teachers and said, hey, if anybody would like to participate next year, we're going to do a pilot. And the pilot really is to look at and think about what curriculum do we want to use, and what would that structure look like at the elementary level? Because, like I said, we participated in an hour of code, but we had a lot of success, but we wanted to expand. So we have about 85 teachers across the district and representing in all 17 elementary schools. It's a voluntary pilot, so like I said, we have teachers from all levels, K-5 and all schools, and that work here is to really talk to teachers, also get a sense at what's happening at the regional and national level to come up with a model, because we know what our goal is. Our goal is to be able to provide computer science and coding experiences for all students, K-8, and we'll talk more about the middle school and high school piece. Greg will talk about that, but I wanted to just kind of talk about the K-5 so you'll get a sense of the foundation. K-5, we really focus on computational thinking within the context of coding. So creativity, collaboration, communication, persistence, and problem solving. So you saw that in the video where we tried to showcase what's happening within the elementary level around computational thinking. So elementary level, you'll see code up there, so the word code. That's we have a partnership, K-5, with code.org, so we're using code.org courses in kindergarten through 4th grade, and we're using a Scratch course in 5th grade. So we have some teachers who have have worked on developing that Scratch course with resources from around the country. We're really finding that it's really providing depth that our students need, as well as the application-based programming. So this is a sense of our K-5 computer science pathway of what's happening in the pilot. So you'll see in kindergarten and 1st grade, students are doing course 1 in code.org. And that's really block-based programming, and kids can start coding if they can't read. Because you might have seen, as we had Nate up doing some coding using those block codes and their direction arrows. And then we go into 2nd and 3rd grade where kids are in course 2, 4th grade course 3, and if needed, our 4th grade extend into course 4. There's also other tutorials within the code.org studio, but that's really the framework of what we're doing in our pilot. As well as 5th grade, like I said earlier, is engaged in the Scratch course. So really quickly, 2 types of coding. So the block coding is what's also used in Roblox, and you'll see here, it's where students drag and drop blocks. This is a way to scaffold student understanding before they get right into line-based coding. They can use the block coding first, and then as they move through the blocks, you'll see that there's text that's overlaid within the blocks. And then there's line-based coding. So our kids move, and that's why the arrow goes from the block over to the line, so they'll be gradually scaffolded over into line-based coding. And I'll hand it over to Greg, and he'll talk about our middle school and high school elements.
All right. So to continue the work as students get to middle school, we want to make sure that we have multiple entry points for kids, right? And we want to make sure that we're those students who are ready to run with that line-based coding, but also recognize that we need to continue block-based coding that really helps build that logic that students need and some fundamental coding skills. Particularly what we have in mind is that when we integrate coding into science and math, some of the core disciplines, that's when we can really reach all kids. So we have historically had coding and robotics available to students via CTE, which is Career and Technical Education electives, but we know that not all kids take that. We certainly want to continue to have those important electives, but we also want to develop some integrated courses, recognizing that when we think about science and math, those are perfect opportunities for coding really to be folded in thoughtfully right into that curriculum. When we think about science, a subject like biology is so much about coding and will continue to be as we look at systems biology and the power to use large data sets and to use code to really help us investigate biological phenomenon, whether it would be ecosystem dynamics, or whether it would be healthcare. So what you see up on top is that we're currently piloting, this is a code.org course. They have modules that have kids doing coding so that they can investigate science phenomena like ecosystems. So the picture you see up there at the top left, that kind of green and white one, is some code that's a screenshot, an activity that a student would do at middle school as they're exploring ecosystems, where they're kind of developing a model of an ecosystem, and then they're able to control elements of that model, like organisms and their populations, and they can study that growth. So that's why you see the code.org icon next to it. Those are code.org resources, right? And then below that, you see that we also have a pilot going on where this is one of the CTE electives. It's a Python-based pilot. So that's a program that is a great step up from block-based coding. It's line-based coding for sure, and it's kind of similar to Java or C++, but it has a good entry point for that middle school group. And we think that we can also have a Python-based piece potentially at high school. But what we have right now is, in fact, next door, we have teachers from our middle schools who are engaged right here in the Baker room, right across from us, in that training. So we're in the midst of really looking at how do we prepare teachers to teach coding courses at middle school, and how do we get kids excited about doing that. Below that, you see that we have robotics as well. That's in white instead of yellow because we've had that robotics piece, but just wanting you to know when we think about our middle school offering, kids have multiple exposures to computer science. Some are it. You have the integrated pieces that students could conceivably get in math and science, and again, those need to be developed and integrated into the courses. But that's the plan of action. The second one is the Python-based CTE course, so that kids who are really ready to run with this line-based coding do that via Python. And then the third one is the robotics piece, right? Kids have been exposed to robotics at K-5, and we want them to also have that exposure at middle school, so we have a piece there. Looking at the high school, what's in yellow is what's new. So while we have had an introduction to computer science course, we've really looked at re-examining with that lens of equity for girls and students of color and others who have not necessarily participated in that historically. How can we re-examine that curriculum? So again, this comes from partnership with code.org and others, but we're piloting resources in an introduction to computer science course, and we're trying to determine what's really that ideal curriculum to get kids excited and engaged with learning. But we need courses like that as a gateway to AP Computer Science. Again, if we look at our AP Computer Science data, Cheri was sharing with you kind of some of the equity that we have around it for gender and race, but also the total number of students enrolled is not where we would like it to be. It's not where it should be if we think about the importance of computer science going forward. So building the early stages and getting kids excited about it and helping them develop skills so that when they get to AP Computer Science, they really feel prepared to do that. Rather than, I think right now, a lot of the students who enter our AP Computer Science course may have been prepared even outside of the district. So we want to just own that and say, what can we do to get all kids ready? So this is a snapshot of what that pathway could look like. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hand this back to Cheri. Yeah. So if we flip back real quick, I'll take this one, and then what we're going to do is we'll do questions at the end, but just a clarification question about this slide. The top two there are the pilots, right? The Project Lead the Way is a piece that's been ongoing. Yeah. So we'll discuss kind of the scaling of the pilot as we kind of conclude here, but I'll make sure I come back to that. Yeah.
So in summary, in thinking about our K-12 STEM initiative, some of the main pieces that we did talk about were the NGSS-aligned curriculum and practices. And one thing I wanted to add into that is a big part of our model is professional development for teachers. So the last 3 years, as we've talked about for our elementary teachers, facing in cohort 1, 2, and 3, over the last 3 years, it's with that has come extensive professional development over the of the year. So providing real-time training to teachers just before they teach those engineering units, because engineering in elementary is new. It's an addition. So we're doing a lot of support for teachers along the way. Greg also mentioned the arts integration, robotics, and the family engineering. One of our big parts of our elementary initiative is engaging families in engineering, and I think we're going to move forward also with engaging in coding and computer science. This will have all 17 elementary schools participate in Hour of Code, and we talked about our K-5 coding pilot as well as the K-12 pathway. So I'd like to invite Dr. Sarah Brewer up from Phantom Lake. We're very lucky to have Phantom Lake. They were a cohort 2 school, so this is their second year in the STEM initiative, and Dr. Brewer has been really instrumental in getting a lot of teachers and students involved in coding at the elementary level. So I'll have her talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to invite some students up to give their opinion on our work.
Hi, as they mentioned, my name is Sarah Brewer, and I am the Technology, Curriculum, and Instructional Leader over at Phantom Lake Elementary. There's actually one of me in each building, so it's kind of exciting to have all of the developers working with us, instructional leaders in the class or in the buildings, coding and computer science. There's a couple of things that I'd like to talk to you guys about today. We're going to talk about the impact of coding in the classroom at Phantom Lake Elementary. We're also going to talk about the teachers' responses to coding and computer science. Last year was our first year participating in STEM. So last year we also participated for the first time in the Hour of Code. In December, what happens is the Hour of Code for Code.org occurs, and they have students across the world coding for an hour at a time. That was really exciting, and that kind of sparked some intrigue, not only in our students, but also in our teachers. Teachers asking for more, and that wasn't something that I was expecting right off the bat. I figured that was something that would slowly grow. But teachers were really excited about this because the students were really excited about this. Towards the spring of last year, we had a parent approach us and ask us if they could kind of go further with coding with our students, and we said yes. This parent came in and offered a Scratch course with some of our 4th and 5th grade students. The amount of students that signed up for that was overwhelming. We had to do a little bit of a process to get everyone in, so we divided up our courses over the spring. But I'm fortunate enough to say that we've continued that on through this year as well. So the impact of coding in the classroom. This is something that has been really interesting to see our students grab a hold of, not only at our kindergarten level, but also up to our 5th grade students. We're working this year in our building. Each building kind of sets up their own little goals for the year that they want to work on, and ours is social emotional health and growth mindset. So we've really been working with our students to plot on the mood meter, to work together for collaboration, and also to be able to grow their brains and say, you know what, I don't understand this. Well, I don't understand this yet. And they've taken that into coding, and it's been a really interesting experience to see them embrace the coding, realize that it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to say, I don't know this yet, but how can we problem solve together and work together to figure out this issue that I'm running into in my coding? The communication that's happened between students is amazing. There's times where you'll find students who just kind of sit there and they're very introverted and they like to do things on their own, but when it comes to coding, they'll buddy up with anybody because they want to work as a driver and a navigator. And that's something that we really push with our kiddos is you don't code alone. So even if you're at home and you're coding, we want to make sure that you pull your brothers or your sisters or pull in your parents and have them code with you and teach them. Because I have to say, I'm being taught by these kiddos because they are far exceeding my knowledge level when it comes to coding. When I walk into the room, I'm like, oh, I've never seen that before. Show me how you did that. And that's a really cool experience. The students are excited about this. When I walk through the hallways, it's always, hey, Mr. Brewer, when are you coming in to code with us? And I'm like, oh, cool, I've become the coding lady in our building. And I'm not a coder, but I guess I'm turning into one. So that's interesting to see as well. For our teachers' response to coding and computer science, there's always going to be teachers on the forefront who are really excited to get into coding or something new that has to happen with science. And there's going to be teachers who are a little bit hesitant because of their knowledge and experience with technology, and that's completely understandable. At our school, we had one teacher in each grade level show interest in the coding pilot. Not everyone ended up going through with it, but a majority of our grade levels have at least one classroom doing the coding pilot. As the teachers have gone through their professional development in the coding pilot, they've run into their own little roadblocks and solved their own problems that they're running into. For example, our kindergarten class is part of the coding pilot. And if you can imagine sitting down with 19 5-year-olds sitting down to code on the computer, it can be quite interesting. So one thing that we've done is we've set up on Monday afternoons, and actually head back to my building, this is what I'll be doing, is a coding buddy pilot. So what we're going to do is we're going to take half of our kindergartners and ship to third grade, another class as a part of the coding pilot, and take the other half of the third graders and bring them down. Half of the class will be doing robotics, and the other half will be doing coding, and then they'll switch halfway through. And this is something we're going to continue on throughout the school year. Other teachers have shown interest in doing the same exact thing, so we might have coding buddies at other levels. Teachers are realizing that this is something that they can do. It's always kind of scary to walk into a classroom and be like, we're going to be doing this new cool thing, and I don't know much about it, but we're going to learn together. We've had teachers come forward and say, you know what? If you can come up, Sarah, and help us do this, we're going to start coding this year. And I said, absolutely. Send me a calendar invite. I'll be there. And seeing that excitement of them giving their students an opportunity that they didn't have is really cool to experience, not only for the kids, but for the teachers. At Phantom Lake Elementary, there are 52 languages spoken across our students. So we have quite a large ELL population. We also have a special education population, and we make sure that every single student has the opportunity to code. So we work with our ELL facilitator to help with coding in some areas. We pair up students so that they can code together both in their own languages, and then we pair them up with students who don't speak their native language, because coding is a language of its own. And once they become comfortable with that, they realize that it kind of crosses all students. We also have students who are in special education where, for behavioral reasons, they're kind of seen by their peers as someone who are hard to interact with. The second that we pull out the computers and we start to code, it's away. They become a peer, and then they become a peer who knows things, and they get to shine in their own light, and that's really exciting. We also have students with visual impairments where we go through as teachers and help them participate in coding as well, because otherwise they wouldn't have those opportunities outside of the building. So we make sure that that's there. I do have to say that it's been quite amazing to have the support of Cheri and Greg in our building. Anytime that a teacher calls up and goes, hey, I'm trying this really cool new thing with coding, you want to come watch? They're there. They'll send a calendar, they'll come show up, and they will be there to support those teachers. They've also come in and taught some of our third grade students different vocabulary when it comes to coding and led a coding session with them. So I have to say this work wouldn't be able to be done without the support of our developers in STEM and computer science. So they're very special. We need to give them a round of applause. I'm going to pass the mic back over to Cheri, and then we'll introduce our students.
So we're very excited to have 4 students here from Phantom Lake Elementary to share their experiences and insights. They are very brave and have agreed to come and speak to you all. So I'd like to invite our students up, our student panel. Come on. And I'll have you introduce yourself and share your story.
Hi, I'm Makoa, and I go to Phantom Lake Elementary, and I'm in 5th grade. Coding using blocks of good code is a good way to get an experience with computer science. We learned that this is the same way college students first learn how to code. Many different jobs require to know how to code. What I like about coding is you get to use your math skills and common sense. For instance, if you want your characters to move to a certain destination, you use your math skills to find out to go straight or turn. I feel like coding can be a very fun and challenging activity, and I think it's easier to learn the skill at a younger age. If you learn to code when you are older, it can make it harder, and you have to really persevere. That is what I like about coding as a 5th grader.
My name is Anthony, and I'm a 5th grader at Phantom Lake School. I think coding is a fun activity to learn about and do. When coding, you have to use your math, reading, and sometimes even your art skills to complete the puzzles in each stage of the course. I thought coding was too easy at first, but once you finish the first few stages, it becomes more difficult and more fun. As I worked with coding, it made me want to learn more about how coding works and what I can do with the coding skills I am developing. In coding, you have a driver and a navigator. It is fun being the driver because I get to do the puzzles. I also like to navigate because I get to help my partner and work with them to fix mistakes. I also like that some coding problems are hard to work through for me, but I like that it gets my brain working. Coding is challenging and fun at the same time, and that's why I like it.
Hi, I'm Helene. I'm in 5th grade, and I'm from Phantom Lake Elementary. I think coding is an important activity for boys and girls all over the world to learn, especially here in Bellevue. Computer programming strategies will help kids in the future by introducing them to computer science at a young age. It is cool to see how coders make computer programs and animation. It is really exciting to see the computer do something based off the code that I wrote for it. My favorite part about coding is creating different characters and settings. Coding can also be a good way to practice how to work together and complete a challenging puzzle. When you code, you do it in pairs. One person is the driver that works on the computer. The other person is the navigator that helps the driver figure out the code. It's not all about just learning computer programming. It's also about having fun with computer science. I believe that kids across the country should have this opportunity with coding. I'm appreciative that in Bellevue I get coding at such a young age. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Annie, and I'm a 5th grader at Phantom Lake School. As a 5th grader, I feel coding is helpful and fun. One reason why it's helpful is in the future we're going to have a job, and many jobs in the future will involve coding and trying to figure out solutions to problems. By learning about coding in elementary school, I will know how to do some of the coding basics when I get a job. The second reason why coding is helpful, it boosts up your learning. It boosts up your learning because it makes you try something, see if it works, and fix it if needed, and that requires perseverance. One reason why code.org is fun because there are movie and cartoon characters that kids like. The last reason why coding can be so much fun is because you don't have to do it by yourself. You can do it with a friend or partner. You get to know others people's ideas and learn from them. It takes a lot of cooperation. Coding is helpful, fun, and also very interesting. Wow, coding has many things you can do. If you haven't tried coding, you should really try it. It's never too late to learn coding.
Thank you to the 4 of you. We really appreciate your insights and your bravery to come and speak in front of a large group. We really appreciate it. So at this time, I'll have you guys come over here because you might be part of the panel of answering questions. But we'll go ahead. We have about 15 minutes left, and we want to reserve that time for questions that you might have regarding our K-12 initiative. Yes. Great question. So her question was, is this part of in-class after school? So yes, this is the coding pilot that we're engaging in K-5 is during the school day. The robotics program that we have that Greg talked about, that is after school. And that's part of the work that we believe all kids should have access to that. So It is free of cost. And you did hear Dr. Brewer mention many of our teachers are starting to embed the robotics during the school day. So the goal is absolutely to provide the pathway during the school day. Great question. Thank you. Yes.
Right. It's a good question. I think that's why the integration of the coding into some of the core disciplines is really important too. We definitely keep kids progressing with coding through middle school. So by taking the coding and putting that into science and mathematics, that's a strategy to address what you're raising, that issue of it being elective-based, these competing interests. So we still will continue to offer elective-based coding options because we think that's important, but there is always going to be those choices, at least in the current structure, right, in terms of the electives at middle school that kids have available to them. So we want to keep those pieces in place, but we also try to provide computer science education to all students by folding that into other disciplines that all students do take. So in the short term, so that was a question that came earlier about what does that timeline look like. So we don't know exactly what the timeline looks like. We can speculate, and if we look back to when we started the STEM initiative 2 years ago, we thought, let's have a 5-year timeline for that. And over the course of that first year, we realized we can accelerate this into a 3-year timeline. And so we were able to, when we think about the engineering work and so the robotics pieces that were part of the original STEM initiative, that's in place here in year 3. So if we look to that as a model, we think possibly 3 years again could be an opportunity to get there. But we don't know that yet. We're so early in year 1. We're just a few months in. So our goal right now is to study the curriculum that we're implementing, because we don't want to scale something that we don't think is quality. So we're learning about that curriculum right now. We're doing the early training for teachers. And we're also looking at what are models to deliver computer science education. I mean, I've talked about the integrated piece and the electives, but how can we really scale this and support teachers? Computer science is a challenge because many of our teachers don't have a strong background in computer science themselves, so there's a lot of professional development that goes into that, but we hope that, I think 3 years is possible. I can't promise that piece, but we will have greater clarity on that over the course of this year as we learn about it. It is a priority, though. I can't tell you exactly. Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah. Right. Well, that's something that we have to address. If kids are wanting to take the courses and there isn't spots available, that's something that we need to build courses for. And I see Eric nodding his head back there, Director of Instructional Technology. It's a piece that we certainly want to fix if there's a disconnect between interest and courses available. I can tell you that right now, part of the work this year is looking at CTE and saying, how does CTE look differently going forward? So I'm not the only person who can speak to that. I'm not actually in the CTE department, but certainly STEM, right, and CTE, there's great overlap there. CTE, again, is career and technical education, and the reason I mentioned CTE, for those of you not familiar, is because many of our electives that are computer science-based have historically been, or robotics-based, historically been in that CTE umbrella, right? And so the issue again there is, how can we go to all students if we have it within CTE? So I think really the long-term solution is that our CTE programs do need to expand, and we need to make sure we have enough courses and enrollment available for students who want those, but we also have to develop kind of the core courses, including computer science more. So personally, from my side, I'm going to be working on that. How can our core courses include that more? And then we have a director of career and technical education who I collaborate with, and we talk about that issue from her and from the career and technical education side of how can we change the CTE offerings, or how can we make sure that we scale it appropriately so that all kids can have their interests and needs met. But I appreciate you sharing that because that's good feedback. Yes.
I'm wondering if the kids can tell us if they're using any of the skills that they're learning in coding in other activities that they're doing outside of school.
Okay, so I'll repeat that for you guys. You guys want to, maybe one of you want to, or a few of you, if you could stand, if you don't mind. The question is, think about the coding experience that you guys have had, and do you feel the skills that you're using and learning as you code are applicable or something that you can use in other areas of your school or in other areas of your life? I see you nodding your head yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You want to? Okay, we'll come back to you.
I think it can help in math and reading, kind of, and art sometimes. I think it might help because, like, if you're trying to move something somewhere, you have to use your math skills to help find it. Numbers.
So what do you mean when you move? What do you mean by when you're trying to move? Tell me about that. You mean in terms of moving something in coding?
Yeah, if you try and move something in coding to go where you want it to go.
Would one of you like to add something to what are you learning when you're doing the coding, and what you're learning maybe be applicable beyond coding?
In class, we did an oil spill, and we had to use our strategies to figure out how to clean up the oil spill. And if we had the least amount of oil, you would get a good grade on it. And
So how the problem-solving skills from coding compare to that?
You know what to say, you just told me. To like make you think more, and then like use those coding strategies to like kind of compare.
You know, one similarity with both of the new pieces, the engineering piece of the curriculum, the coding, is that there's an open-ended process. There's more than one way to solve a problem. And there's more than one solution, right, to an answer. It's not necessarily just one, and certainly more than one way to solve the problem. So that's when they were talking a little bit about the process, right? The students have learned the engineering design process, which is an iterative process, right? They think about the problem, they design solutions, and then they go back and test those solutions and probably revise it. So there's a lot of overlap there in the process that we're trying to make sure we convey to students as they go, to make that evident, right? That you're really, the engineering design process and what you use in coding to solve problems is a very similar skill set. And I think what also showed up in the video is it's team-based. So the engineering problems that you're working on as they're studying science, and then the coding that students are doing, that's a lot of team-based work. And we know how important that is, not just in school, but in life and in work beyond school. Yeah.
In the APCS statistics that you showed, is that comparable to other science courses like AP Physics, AP Chemistry, or is it like,
Right.
Is the thing very lopsided, like other things are more equitable?
Right. So the question had to do with equity in other AP courses, science courses particularly. So what we see is computer science is the least equitable, particularly if we're looking, say, at gender, for example. We have the biggest gaps. If we look within science at AP Physics, that would be kind of our next, but there's a pretty big gap there between AP Computer Science and AP Physics. For example, right now, we know that at Interlake we have more females in AP Physics than we do males. So although we do have a gap overall as a district, that gap is not huge. It's not a big gap in any of the other AP Science courses. There may be gaps, but they're not exaggerated the way that we see in the AP Computer Science. Yeah.
I don't want to harp on middle school, but I want to make sure I understand. The kids in middle school now,
No, they could make it to AP Computer Science by 11th grade. I wouldn't say the ball got dropped. I'd say we're building that right now. And already you have an Introduction to Computer Science course that's in place at high school. So if a student shows up and hasn't had, to our district, new to our district and hasn't had any computer science, they can take an Introduction to Computer Science. I was just in Sammamish High School on Friday, and we were talking with the teacher of that Introduction to Computer Science piece. So that's a course that's ongoing right now, where show up with really no coding background, and they're doing Scratch-based work in that course, right, at 9th grade. So they can do that right now. They could. They absolutely could take their intro class in 9th and still make it to AP by 11th. And what we're also recognizing is we want to start earlier because we want to ignite kids around this earlier. We know that if we're really serious about reaching marginalized groups and groups that have not historically participated in computer science, we need to light that fire and get them excited about it early. And we also know that kids can really fundamentally go farther as they start earlier too. So I want to stress that what we're doing is really novel. I heard the suggestion that maybe the ball was dropped, but what I would say to that is that what we're doing here is entirely unique in terms of the scale to do this for all kids, particularly from an early age. So if we look at Code.org partnerships, because Code.org does have partnerships with other districts in this state, we are one of 2 districts in the entire state that is doing it at every school. So while other districts may claim a Code.org partnership, they might have only one school participating. It could be like a STEM magnet school. So that comes back to Cheri's point about it's about all kids. Yeah, other questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
You were looking after his question, how did kids traditionally get into the AP computer science?
Yeah, the question was, how did kids traditionally get into the AP computer science track? So they could have taken an introductory course, but the true answer to that is I think that many kids weren't choosing to go that route. And so when we think about how did kids get prepared to do it, while a few of them may have done that by taking an Introduction to Computer Science course, many were actually taking things outside of the district. Maybe they were doing summer programs. Maybe they were doing after-school programs that were fee-for-service, and they were learning things like Java outside of our district. So they may say, oh, well, I haven't done any of this, but my parents understand computer science, and they've enrolled me in a Java course for over the summer, and that maybe got a student ready. So I think that's what's contributed to some of the gaps that we saw was we needed to recognize, to reach all students, we need to build a better pathway. And it's not that there was no pathway in place, it's just that the pathway could be better. Yeah, great question. The question was, are there other districts that have pathways like this? And is this a growing trend where we would see this across the country? So what I would say is that, there are other districts that are trying to build something like this, but they're few and far between. So San Francisco Unified is a district that's trying to do something similar to this. Chicago is trying to do something similar to this. A few pretty big districts are pursuing this, but I don't think there's anyone that we would really point to that we would say is out ahead of us. But what we could say is, to answer your second question, I'm confident that in 5 to 10 years, probably 5, schools will look back and districts will look back and say, wow, why didn't we start doing that earlier, and how can we do that? And absolutely all kids need computer science education. Right? So that I'm confident of, and that there's already kind of that surge to make that happen. And I think you see a lot of that with like an hour of code. If you look at the hour of code, there's a lot of participation there in that, and it's growing exponentially every year because of that. And I'm looking at our time and realizing maybe we should take one more question here. Does that sound good? And I saw one in the back there. Or actually, yours was first, so I'll take these last 2. You had a question. Yes. 2 questions? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do we pick program language? So a lot of that comes truthfully from the curriculum. So, and your point is that those can become obsolete over time. And so those are, when we pick a language, it doesn't mean we pick it forever, but really that we look at industry and we take recommendations from the College Board, which has the AP computer science curriculum, and we go with those languages, but those languages will evolve, as you say, or in some cases become obsolete. So we do need to continue to turn that over, and we will. And did you have a second one? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So questions about networking. We do have a Cisco networking that's open to all students, so that's an option as well. I didn't highlight that one in there, but it was reflected in the spreadsheet up there. So yeah, we are addressing those as well. And when we look at an AP Computer Science Principles course, it also includes some of the database and the networking skills. And then last one right back here. Yes. Yeah. So, I think what we look at is systems that reflect and are similar to our system because it's a different challenge. If you're scaling something through a district versus a single school. So we do look at single schools and keep an eye on what others are doing, but we particularly look at, who are districts that are really doing this right at scale or trying to do this at scale. So to answer your question, it's both, right? We do want to attend to what might a particular private school be doing and what could we learn from that. But I think our best learning can often come from how is another district that's similar in scale to us approaching a problem like this, and what can we maybe learn from them? So Cheri and I took a trip up to Marysville. That's the only other district in the state right now that's trying to do this at scale with computer science for all kids. And so we have started that collaboration, and we have looked to some of the private schools too to see what are they doing for their coding curriculum, and there's a lot of similarity between what we're doing and what we've seen. Yeah. So I can't off the top of my head name a few of those. I'd say we looked at, I know that we talked with a private school in Mercer Island that I'm blanking the name on, so I apologize. But there's been a couple as we've gone through it. Other questions? I think that's our last. So I'll stay here and take further questions as we go. But I want to thank you all again for coming out, and I want to do a big thank you to Bellevue School Foundation for the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this afternoon. We hope that you learned much. I know I did. And let us know if there are topics that you would like to hear about so that we can continue planning education connections that are meaningful to our community. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.